Big ID is the leading data security posture management or DSPM vendor, and they do DSPM differently. DSPM centers around risk management and how organizations need to assess, understand, identify, and remediate data security risks across their data. Big ID seamlessly integrates with your existing tech stack and helps you uncover dark data, identify and reduce risk, take action through remediation, and scale your data security strategy. Big ID is reshaping the future of data security, and CB Insights named Big ID the leader in DSPM and the most disruptive cybersecurity software in the space. Visit securityweekly.com/Big ID to learn more. Graylog elevates enterprise-level cybersecurity through its comprehensive SIEM, centralized log management, and API security solutions. Built on the Graylog platform, Graylog Security combines SIEM, security analytics, threat detection, and incident response capabilities. Unlike traditional SIEMs, which offer complex and costly setups, Graylog Security simplifies security and operational challenges with an optimal blend of licensing, people, and infrastructure costs. To see a demo, visit securityweekly.com/Graylog. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. For this interview, Nathan Sportsman joins us today to talk about recording an oral history of cybersecurity and hacking. Nathan is the founder and CEO of Praetorian, one of the industry's best-known consulting firms when it comes to offensive security, research, and some very cool open source tools I was looking at last night while I was preparing. I was catching up on the latest stuff that you guys are doing over there. Welcome to the show, Nathan. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And yeah, very excited about this project. Trying to recall exactly what I said in the LinkedIn DMs when one of your folks hit me up about this. But they sent me some links, and I said, yeah, you had my attention, with the whole idea of interviewing hackers through history and stuff like that. But this Miro map that you sent me, like that just blew me away. Like I'm there. I'm a sucker for any kind of research like that. I'm kind of a research junkie myself, and that was actually a lot of the work that we did. We were just talking about. I was a member of attrition, and we did a lot of cataloging, a lot of like the industry charlatan list was there, and we cataloged I think the first database of breaches, open vulnerability database, OSVDB, came out of that group. So yeah, very excited about this project. So you say, yeah, the mission is to create a definitive oral history of cybersecurity, and maybe talk to us a little bit about where this was inspired and how you're going to tackle this, because it sounds like a huge project.
There were sort of two big things. So one, that there's a show on HBO, a series called Band of Brothers. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but Tom Hanks got involved in that after his film Saving Private Ryan. And what he realized through that series of Band of Brothers was we have a lot of former World War II veterans. They're getting up in age, and we need to account their stories, first person, not secondhand, not a book, but their stories. And then, last year when Kevin passed, it really kind of sparked me to realize we really need to get going on something like this, because we're losing stories in the process. Dan Kaminsky, Joey, a lot of really great names that have done a lot for this industry and were instrumental to it. We need to make sure that we capture those stories. And so those are kind of the two big things that I realized we need to do something and make sure we take account of history.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's that's been with each of these, that's been hitting me. I mean, he's probably not somebody you would have interviewed, but Amit Yoran, just lost him, certainly a giant on the business side in cybersecurity. And I think that's going to be one of the most interesting things about this series is a lot of people know some of these people and what they've done only from one side of it, right? A lot of these people kind of straddle both the like the hacker history and the community of everything. But I've also done stuff in the business world as well, in the industry, that built vendors, stuff like that. Like Weld Pond is a great example of that, Chris Weisopel. And I can't wait for those stories as well, because I think a lot of people know maybe bits and pieces, but there's a lot of gaps, or they only know this individual from one side or the other, or maybe they haven't even connected the two and realized that one of the founders of this huge company was also the person who built this open source tool, right? And I often find people who, have no idea what HD Moore is up to today. And he's built an amazing company doing some really cool stuff, but they just know him for Metasploit, right?
Right. And that's, for me, that was one of the, coming back to that Miro board that you mentioned, that sort of anthropological map, and sort of like the open source vulnerability database. It is a living document. It's a living project. And so we're constantly updating it every week, and it's just growing and growing. But one of the huge takeaways that I had was exactly your point. These people that came from, these hacker groups from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, you can just watch that map of where they worked through that process, whether it was an ad stake or a garden. Ultimately, like you said, they go on to found their own companies, whether it's Weld Pond at Veracode or Attainable, or a lot of the Qualys guys. And it's fascinating to just see how completely interconnected all of this is, and how much of an impact those that were in the early days and in the hacking subculture went on to do all kinds of things for this industry.
I love how Jay Cran is just plugged in everywhere. Like, I was looking at him on the map the other day. He's a good friend, and I had no idea like some of the stuff he had done like before I got to know him, and his whole history. So it was fun seeing how many different lines were popping out of his name and intrigue and all the stuff he's done.
And he's in Austin. HD Moore is in Austin. We're all in a Signal chat, and same thing. I've known Jay Cran for 10, 15 years, something like that. In that 10 or 15 years, I never knew he was CDC. Never knew it.
Oh, yeah, me neither.
Conversation. And
until I saw it on that map, I had no idea.
Yeah. And so it's just those kinds of things like, wow, you learn a lot through just the process of the research and the anthropology of it all. It's pretty cool.
And just capturing the stories of folks, it's like, just, there's so many stories. I mean, look at Darknet Diaries, right? There's so many stories out there. And looking at your map, there's a lot of unknown people still that we still have to figure out and find them.
And we have different versions of the anthropological map where the community is actually adding to that, those people that are unknown, helping us discover who they are. But we're taking sort of this stance through the entire process. We don't want to out anyone that doesn't want to be outed. And so just because we have a name and we know who it is, we have to have explicit permission from that person to add them to the map, or it's public OSINT information. But if it's not public and not known, and we're getting it through back channels, we're not gonna add that name to it. That's their story to tell if they want to be added to the map. And then same thing through these interviews and the stories, letting them have editorial access. It is at the end of the day their interview, their story. And then if there's certain things that were said that maybe they wish they hadn't, certain things that they talked about that they wish they hadn't discussed, we'll let them kind of go through that process. We're not trying to do a gotcha piece on anyone. It's letting each person tell their story the way that they see it.
Yeah. So question here, I've noticed it's definitely not just US centric. It does appear to be very, very global. And I think that's potentially one of the places it gets really interesting is, a lot of us are very, knowledgeable, even those of us who have read books and studied some of this history. Like we all know Loft, we all know CDC to some extent, the CCC over in Germany, but beyond that, it seems like there's a lot of stories that haven't been told. And I'm kind of curious, like, is it tough figuring out where to draw that line? Like Mikko Hyppönen, is that somebody you would interview? Or is that too much on the business side and not enough, within the hacker culture? Like, have you defined that, like who you asked to come on?
Mikko will be here March 10th.
Okay, well, that answers that question.
So our stance on sort of global, there have been a lot of really good documentaries and sort of various forms of studying, but they have tended to be a little bit U.S. centric. And so we want to take a broad view. So Mikko's coming in from Finland. David Shigobi, in February, he's coming in from Sweden, and really make sure we take an account of not just the U.S.'s history, but the world history, because there were a lot of really cool groups out there. And there's a lot of like crazy stuff that you discover through the process. So like, John Lee Corrupt, we got his permission. There was a group at 8LGM. There's two different sayings in terms of what that stood for. One of them was 8 Little Green Men. The other one was actually named after a rock band. Turns out John Lee was not just in MOD, he was actually in that group as well, which was, I think, based out of the UK with Gandalf, if I remember correctly. But it's just so interconnected. When I interviewed with Parmaster, he's working with people.
It was a small world back then.
It's super small. And so we got to be able to look at it from a 360 degrees, because people were interconnected back then, talking to each other from all over the world. And so we are pushing and making it a global documentary, not just a U.S. centric documentary.
Yeah, very cool. And, this is a huge series. Help me a little bit with the logistics of it. Like where do you've got a list, you have maybe some contact details. Where do you start? Do you start with people that go the furthest back, or, because maybe it's hard to get people to come on to schedule that logistics, you just blast everybody and whoever comes in first, it's kind of a first come, first serve. Like, how do you kind of tackle who to bring on and like what order to release the videos and stuff like that? Like, is each video just going to be standalone, or are you going to try and release them in such a way that it, there's some connection between the videos and you're kind of building a story as you go? Like, do you want to try and do a bunch of CDC people all together because they're physically, some of them are still in that area and stuff like that? Or is it just kind of too big to organize and structure that much?
So the first route that we were going to take is exactly what you said. Let's start from the various early days. Let's cover that, and then we're going to pull through linearly based on time. What we found, though, through the process is, one, the logistics in terms of lining those up in the right way, and then two, you would have this person, who could be very instrumental to that group. So if we take, CDC, Swamp Rat, or if we take Loft, and you mentioned Weld Pond or Mudge, not only is it a logistical challenge, sometimes someone is a no, but then they get to a yes once this other person interviews, and we're continuously seeing that dynamic.
Yeah.
What we wound
up
if
they're going to do it, I need to tell my side.
Then I need to do it. And so we've taken another route where it is out of order from a timeline perspective, but we're going to use that anthropological map to then let you as a viewer decide how you want to story tell. And so each of those names will eventually have a link to the video. And so if you are just super curious about CDC, you'll be able to drive through the episodes related to CDC.
And if you're putting them up on YouTube, you could have a CDC playlist, or you could have a time correct timeline playlist. Like, you can reorder the videos however you want. Or I love the idea of just linking the videos to the map, so that as you browse that map, you can dive deep. You can click a video and start watching. That's a very cool approach.
That's the plan. And speaking of Weld Pond and Loft, Joe Grand, Kingpin, he's up next. He's going to be with us in a couple of weeks at the end of January.
Nice.
Very nice. So I want to pivot to talking about the production of this. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the team that you've assembled here. Because first when I heard about it, I was like, oh yeah, everybody's doing podcasts, right? Like, everybody's producing content, right? But this is not a scrappy team that you've assembled here at all. Like, you've got professionals involved. You've got an anthropologist. We're all going to have trouble with that word today. An anthropologist, a historian. You've got an Emmy-winning producer. Talk to me a little bit about putting this team together.
So the
Schiffman, you got to mention Schiffman.
So and we should probably start there. So Mike Schiffman was the first person I reached out to when this was a Google Doc with no, hard to see kind of what the vision of the project is. And through reading that doc, he was immediately in. So he has been instrumental in kind of how we built out the team. Mike Schiffman is the one that had that historian and anthropologist get involved. So Gabriella Coleman, she's a professor at Harvard. She teaches a class on the hacking subculture.
Really?
I didn't even know that was a thing. But he knows Gabriella, so she got involved. She got one of her PhD students, Matt, also involved. And so they're helping us with a lot of the research. They've done a lot of great articles and written a lot of great books on the hacking scene and the hacking subculture. So kudos to Mike Schiffman. He has such a reputation and he has such a network.
For people who don't know, maybe quick bio on Schiffman. Yeah.
So Mike Schiffman was the editor-in-chief of Frack Magazine from 96 to 2000, I believe. He's written a number of books, open source security tools, some of the other hacking books. He's written some of the famous, things that we all used back in the day, like ICMP tunneling, teardrop, the Windows blue screen, and just very novel Firewalk. I believe with Dave. And so just super cutting edge, super novel. Everyone in the industry knows him. He's played a big part. And so he's also played a big part in this. And so that list of folks that you see on our website that are helping out, he was very instrumental in getting those folks involved and getting them to a yes. And then on the Emmy award-winning, sort of Tully award-winning side, Matt and Tyson are fantastic. And so they're helping us with the production, the actual filming, the editing, the post-production, just all the stuff that goes into it, the trailers that we're creating that will drop soon and that sort of stuff.
How's research been for each guest? I'm sure it's a lot of work, and you're there. Are you storyboarding? The guests, like, there's so many questions to ask, right? And so much time. And then have you run into a situation where, hey, we're going to record for an hour, but like, you know what, let's just keep this going? Well, walk us through both parts of that if you can.
The interviews end to end, and then ultimately we trim them down a little bit, but it's about a 3-hour interview. Okay. And so a lot goes into it. And then in terms of the research, it's probably an order of magnitude, maybe times 2. So for 3 hours of interviewing, we probably have to do 60 hours of research. So we do intake questionnaires as a starting point. We do pre-interview interviews just to kind of get an understanding. We do OSINT on anything that we can find on the individual. And then if they have, a book, articles, anything like that, I personally read it to have a background. And so like Parmaster, the Underground, and a book that he was mentioned in quite a bit, read through that to kind of get an understanding of his storyline, and then talking to that person about it. Does this match with what actually happened? And in the case of that book in Parmaster, yes, they really, really interviewed all of us. This is very accurate in terms of what happened. So a lot goes into it. I think to do interviews right, you have to be intellectually curious, which means you have to be passionate about the subject, and then having that information, being informed. Then my job and the other folks that are helping us interview is just facilitating. And so we spend maybe 20% of the time talking, and mostly in question form, and then really let them spend 80% of the time telling their story. But definitely a lot goes into it. And we have kind of an Asana, board with the various steps we have to go through for every interview.
Yeah, I get kind of obsessed with not obsessed, but I do a lot of research on almost everything I do. And when I started making this podcast myself, because I didn't start this podcast, I came on about episode 200, and we're about to hit 400. I had been watching a lot of Hot Ones, and I was very impressed with I don't know if you've ever seen Hot Ones on YouTube, where they bring on a celebrity, they have them go through 10 chicken wings that like increase in spiciness.
Have you ever tried it yourself, like actually buying the sauces and seeing how far you can get?
No, I've tried the spiciest one. So yeah, I've got a couple bottles of the Last Dab, and yeah, I can do it, but I've never experienced, well, because it's cumulative, right? You know, like as you eat spicy stuff, like it doesn't go away immediately. So I've never done the full gauntlet. But but yeah, every show, and there's even mega cuts on YouTube of guests saying like, "Where did you find this stuff?" You know, just complimenting them on their research process for the interview. And so I did kind of a deep dive. I found some podcasts where you know, they talked to Sean about like, what is your process for prepping for these guests? Because you know, these are celebrities who have done thousands of interviews over their career. You know, some of them are new celebrities, but some of them, you know, have been in Hollywood, you know, or been musicians for 40 years, right? You know, and they all say, wow, I'm so impressed with your questions. You really did your research. You know, so I kind of dug into that and figured out what their process is, and very similar to what you're describing. You know, they actually dole it out. Like one person on the team consumes books and things that they've created. Another person does like the OSINT piece and kind of deep dives on their history. Like, what was their first job? Oh, this this weird chicken restaurant in Kansas City nobody's ever heard of. That's not a, you know, it's a local chain or something like that. And yeah, you know, I like that kind of approach where you know, you're really trying to understand the person. You know, not just get entertaining responses out of them.
100%. And this is the first sort of podcast or sort of any sort of, you know, interview process that I've been a part of, you know, outside of recruiting interviews and that sort of thing. And it's an art and it's a skill. And to your point about that team and how much analysis they do, yeah, it seems like every other guest is complimenting on them on that. And the other thing he gets complimented a lot on is like just a simple, how do you know when you've asked a really great question? And the guests will react like, wow, that was a really good question.
Yeah.
Why was that a really good question? Okay, it's because it's something that they've never been asked before that's pretty profound, but yet they can immediately get to the answer. And just studying that as much as possible, where I think my job is like a lamp in the room. I'm simply there to facilitate and to help these people tell their stories in the best way that they can. And I go down these huge rabbit holes to your point of like, how do we make this great? What makes a great interview? What makes great research and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of a trifecta there. Like if you manage to land on something that is a good question for the interview, you know, like it's something interesting, people watching would want to hear them answer. It's something they've wanted to be asked, but nobody's ever asked them that question before. That's even better. And yeah, something that you had to, you know, that nobody's ever heard before. So you kind of get that exclusive, right? You know, like it's a detail of the story or you know, something from their perspective that's never been shared before.
Yep. Yep. And to your point, it all starts with research. Take interest in the subject that you're about to interview and really, really dig in. That's where the gems will come from.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So where does it go from here? It's releasing soon. Yes. Like when does the first episode come out? When is this dropping?
2 weeks and a day. So January 24th, I believe, which I think is a Friday.
January 24th. Okay. Yeah. So a couple of weeks. And what's the frequency going to be like? And are you dropping it on YouTube? Is that the platform or?
Yeah. We're dropping it on YouTube. I think we're going to do something with Podbee to distribute it out across all the other channels as well.
Audio only versions?
Video too.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we're a lot of it is going into the video side. And so for those that want to see the video, to make it available, but also to have a version for audio if you want to listen to it, you know, on a car ride or something like that. As far as the cadence, so, you know, here's kind of the challenge. At my capacity, I can probably do 2 a week. If we have over 200 people and the list keeps growing, we'll be done in about 8.5 years. And so that rate is not, it's too long. And so, we're pulling in other folks to help us interview. You'll see Mike Schiffman is actually one of the folks that will be interviewing folks. He interviewed Matt Harrigan in his recent one, SWR, Shockwave writer, I believe. He'll be interviewing him this quarter as well. Gabriella at Harvard has offered for us to open up a second studio in Harvard to help those that are more East Coast or in Europe fly in
nice.
to Harvard versus Austin. And then we'll do same thing on the West Coast. Where I'd like to get to is we're releasing one a week, but we'll need more folks helping with the interview process to be able to do it at that clip. But for starting out, it'll be two a month, basically.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like once you do a dozen of them, like you'll have it pretty locked down. Like, okay, here's the process. Here's what we need to make this look good. Like we've been doing Security Weekly. Security Weekly's been around for like 15, 16 years now. And we literally have kits that we can send out to co-hosts. If they don't have the right equipment and stuff like that. Like we figured out, okay, what lighting, what microphone, what headphones, in-ear monitors, anything like that do you need? And I love that idea of having like trying to remember what they call it in like with news affiliates and stuff like that. You have like a remote. You have like remote affiliates. It's other studios that can bring that stuff over. It sounds great. Totally. See. So how quickly do you want to get the whole project done? So you do see an end to it then. This is not something you would just do indefinitely.
I think for us to get through this tranche that we want to get through, it would be about, I'd like to get it down to like 3 to 5 years is how long we've been doing it. But I'm starting to get the sense it's going to be an evergreen project, just as the mural board grows and everything else. But I'm having fun. Mike Shipman's having fun. We're all having fun. We'll do it as long as we have cool people to interview, and as long as we have an audience that is interested in kind of what we're up to. And then on the logistics side for those, I don't know, can you see any of these cameras to the right of me, or is it out of shot?
Yeah, it's out of shot for me.
Okay. We have 4 Sony, is it S3s or D3s, but 4 Sony cameras. So for each interview, we have 2 on them and 2 on us, and we would need to replicate that into the other studios. So 4 cameras total for an interview.
Right. Yeah, to have the same effect, the same look. Yeah, maintain that same look. Yeah, because it's again going back to Hot Ones. That's literally part of the script. At the end he says, "This camera, this camera, this camera. Tell us what you have going on in your life." And they pick a camera to look into, but it's always 3 cameras, and the audience knows it's 3 cameras because you hear that. That line is never missed at the end of each one, and I think that's where some of the that's where some of it's enjoyable is there is some structure to it. Like, if you're going to watch 100 celebrities eat chicken wings, you need some kind of structure. You need a similar length. You need to know how long it's going to go. You're looking forward to them, eating the bomb. There's going to be these moments, and you don't know how they're going to react to that question or react to that hot sauce. But that moment is coming up because there is some structure you can expect from it. So I'm jealous that you're building this thing. I'm jazzed to see somebody go after this project, and really excited to see the first episode when it comes out.
Likewise. And to your point about structure, every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So Act 1 is kind of the origin story. How did Kingpin become Kingpin?
Right.
Or if you've read Space Rogue's book, growing up in a town of, I think, like 1,000 people in Maine. So that's Act 1. Act 2 is the hacking scene. And then Act 3 is kind of where they are today. And that's sort of the structure we're following in the interviews.
Do you ever decide to have more than one person recording at one time?
Several people have asked about that. We haven't done it yet. And people have also talked about potential panels, maybe at Black Hat or DEF CON. So we're open to it. We just haven't done it yet. And then respecting, people's privacy, you'll see in these episodes as they drop, some people were not disclosing their first name. It's just their handle, like Skyper, if you're familiar with him. And in some cases, folks that are coming on have asked to us to do something with their face as well. And so we'll do that for those that need it.
I was going to ask you about that. Okay, so you are accommodating that. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. We were just talking about Jack Reciter earlier.
Yeah.
And I remember when he came on Security Weekly, he had some really interesting, because he was on video, but he had some really interesting filter that just turned him into like, like a loose collection of objects. It was like circles or something like that. It was I've never seen anybody use that effect before, but it was pretty cool because you still got the sense of somebody being on video,
right.
But couldn't tell anything about the person's features or anything like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. We're very excited about it. Looking forward to the debut, and hope a bunch of people tune into that. And like you were saying, I imagine each guest you have, they're like, "Hey, are you going to have so and so on?" You're like, "Who's that?" Somebody else to add to the board. So I'm going to be checking out that board, maybe once a month or so, and see how quickly it grows and gets out of control.
It's a work in progress, and it keeps ballooning for sure. And I appreciate the time. Thanks so much for giving me a chance to talk about Warlocks. We're very excited to get it out there too.
Yeah, super exciting.
All right, yeah. Thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today, Nathan.
Thank you, guys.
And we'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly Enterprise news.